Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the Lockdown LitFest, where, as ever, we hope that you are well, we hope that you're keeping well, and we hope that you're taking care. Hand hygiene, social distancing, never more important than now, as lockdown is slowly being released. We need to be careful for ourselves and careful for those around us. We have a hell of a guest for you today, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce her, which I will do by saying this. As a cook, restaurateur, food writer and businesswoman, Prue Leith has played a key role in the revolution of Britain's eating habits since the 1960s. She is, of course, a judge on Channel 4's Great British Bake Off. She's also written an enormous number of cookbooks. But after a long break from food writing, Prue's now returned to writing cookery books after 25 years, alongside her extraordinary fiction, and it's that I really want to focus on today. She's the author of 7 romantic novels, as well as a memoir, Relish, and a fantastic trilogy, which we're going to discuss. All Prue's fiction and her memoir are in print with Quercus Publishing. And just in case you didn't know this, Prue Leith was the Veuve Clicquot Businesswoman of the Year in 1990. She holds 13 honorary degrees or fellowships from UK universities. She was appointed an Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE, in 1989, and more recently, in the 2010 birthday honours, was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire, which allows me to say a very warm welcome to the Lockdown LitFest, Dr. Prue Leith, CBE. How are you, Prue?
I'm absolutely fine, Paul.
It's very nice to see you. Can you tell us where in lockdown, where you've been locked down? Where are we talking to you from?
From the Cotswolds. I mean, I could not be luckier. We have a lovely garden. We have a big house. I can go for walks for miles and not see a soul. And because I'm that lucky over 70 age group, people shop for me. So I've had a really great lockdown.
You have people shopping for you. That's fantastic.
And I have Ocado delivers and all the rest of it. I've not had to leave the house
for over 3 months now.
Yeah.
How it's
and I really loved it. I thought I would never be able to do that because normally I am just so busy. I just run around like a lunatic, and it's been fantastic. And just like everybody else has said, you know, we've had the wonderful summer, a beautiful spring, and time to look at it. And, you know, I know we're going to lose all that again, and it's a pity because it's so great.
It's been lovely to hear the bird song, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. A lot of authors that I've spoken to for Lockdown LitFest over the last few weeks have said that one of the delights, and they feel a little guilty about it because, of course, they realize there is so much pain and grief across the nation, across the world, but it's got them back to being an author. It's given them the time and space of not having to do publicity tours, not having to do TV, not having to do all the day-to-day stuff that gets in the way of writing. So they've sat in their sheds or their writing rooms or their studies up and down the nation, across the world, in fact, and they've never felt more like authors for quite some years. Have you had a similar experience?
Well, not really, because I quite agree. I've always had that feeling that if I'm not writing, I feel itchy and uncomfortable, not right. But because I have been cooking so much more, which I hadn't done, frankly, for 25 years, I've been so busy writing novels. And somehow, because I'd got the trilogy done and The Lost Son published, I thought, as I think every author thinks at the end of a book, right, that's it. For 5 minutes, you think, I might stop now. And I always think I'll stop, and then I always go on. And it usually takes a week or two, and then I get the itch again, and I start writing another book. You know, I have not had that itch. I have had the whole of lockdown and not written a fictional word. I've written journalism and stuff.
Yes.
You know, diaries and Spectator things, but I haven't written I haven't even written an outline. So maybe that terrible itch has gone and I need never write another book. Wouldn't that be great?
Writers are writers because they write, and I hope you're going to have more writing from you. Just to come back, you said you've been cooking. What have you been cooking and who for, Prue?
Well, I've been cooking mostly for my beloved husband, and so the two of us have had. And he's very complimentary about what I do. He often says things like, don't think I've ever had the same thing twice," but that's because he's not very good at remembering. You know, but it is true that he sometimes says, "Well, I live on leftovers," And he does live on leftovers because I'm one of those old-fashioned cooks who can't ever throw anything away. So when it's lunchtime, I open the fridge and think, what can I do with that? And I will do something different with it. So I've done that. It's for years since I've cooked 2 meals a day for a family. Well, it's only 2 meals a day for the two of us. But I have also, thank God, because it's proper cooking, I've also been doing a dinner on Friday nights for our local care home, and not for the patients, because they are mostly on liquid diets or difficult diets. But I rang up the woman who runs it, and I said, look, can't I cook for you guys, because I have nothing to do, and I want, it's what I do. And she said, you can't cook for the patients, but for goodness sake, wouldn't you like to do something for the nurses and the care staff? And I said, yes, I'd love to. So there are 30 of them. And every Friday, for the last 11 weeks or something, I've delivered them. And it's wonderful cooking, because they like really old-fashioned things. So I've made shepherd's pie and fish pie and spag bowl, and tonight they're getting curry and rice. I can't tell you. It's the simplest family old-fashioned cooking.
And you do this in your...
I mean, because there are 30 of them, I have to think about it a few days ahead, and I have to do a bit of prep. So it's been my main activity, and I've loved it. Absolutely loved it. So I don't want to be virtue signaling, saying I'm doing something noble and wonderful, because every chef I know and every cook I know is doing cooking for either people who can't afford it, or for food banks, or for care homes. So there's nothing unusual about it, but it's just that I have so enjoyed it. It's been a real pleasure.
I'm delighted. And are you doing this from your home kitchen?
Yeah, but I have
wonderful.
I have a wonderful kitchen.
A previous guest on Lockdown, Charles Spencer, opened up the kitchens at Althorpe to a fantastic chef who's also doing a lot of cooking for frontline workers and for healthcare staff. So it's a very good. We're pretty good as a nation, aren't we? Where we do actually pull together rather well.
Well, I think we all like to think we're doing something positive. And yes, I think it has brought out the positive side of most people. Now people are beginning to be a bit carpy and looking for someone to blame, which I think is a mistake.
We might discuss this later. We may not. You mentioned writing. Let's come to writing. This is, when it comes down to it, as well as a culture hub, a literature festival. So having discussed a bit of cooking, can we talk through the first of what you call the Angelotti Chronicle, which is just such, I cannot commend it highly enough. It started with a book called The House at Chorlton. Can I take you back to what the initial seed idea was that made you think, hold on, there's a story here. There are characters here. There's a sense of place here. This is going to pique my interest, because you and I both know that writing is such a solo endeavor. You have to really commit to it for it to work. Can you take us back to how the Angelotti Chronicle started?
Well, it started with, because I'm very interested in the history of food, it actually started with me thinking I should write a book about how food has changed in my lifetime, which is basically since the war to now. And it's changed massively. I mean, if you think from rationing to, comfort food, and then nouvelle cuisine, and so on and so on, right up to molecular biology now, and extraordinarily styled food, and junk food, and food that has no real ingredients in it. It's been amazing. So I wanted to write some history of it. And then I thought that'll be really boring and nobody would buy it. And after all, I'm a novelist. So I thought I'll build a story about a catering family. And I had in mind Charles Forty, the Forty family.
Oh, yeah, yes, of course.
He came to, Charles' grandfather came to Scotland in the 20s or something, and set up an ice cream store. And that has now, that 40 company is now, as we all know, international Rocket 40 hotels all over the world, and 5-star hotels. He had hotels in Park Lane, his father did. So, and it's in a couple of generations that happened. So I thought, if I took an Italian prisoner of war who meets an English girl, and that would put me back where I'm most comfortable, which is in a great love story. And so it starts with them, and it's a 3-generation dynasty. And the last one, which I've just published, is The Lost Son. And that first couple, in the Italian and the English girl, they have an illegitimate baby. And in the war, and just after the war, of course, that was absolutely, there were so many illegitimate children that were never recognized and were adopted, because the mores at the time just meant your family kicked you out, basically, if you were middle class. Anyway, so in The Lost Son, that boy who is adopted on the day that he's born, I mean, he's taken away on the day he's born, comes back into the family in the third book when he's a 55-year-old, enormously successful businessman, but unhappy with his life. And he comes crashing into this very Italian family and falls in love with a whole lot of them. So it's just a completely... Each of the novels, of course, which you have to do in a trilogy and is really difficult to do, is to make them all completely standalone. So if you only were reading The Lost Son, it wouldn't matter that you wouldn't know where he came from, because you'd discover it in the book. But it's quite difficult to do that. And when I set out to write this trilogy, I was worried about whether I would be able to do it because of the length of time. But what I hadn't realized is how complicated it gets, because there's more and more people come into the story. People get married, they have children, and so on. And some people die, and you need to, or leave the story for some other reason, and you have to keep all this stuff in your head. And in my case, on the file on the computer, but I had to keep going back and saying, what color is his hair? I mean, 3 generations is too many to handle. When I think of, Elizabeth Jane Howard writing 5,
right.
Cazalet, I don't know how she did that. I was very glad to put the end to The Lost Son.
Well, we'll talk about The Lost Son specifically in a minute. I like the reference to the Rocco sort of dynasty, and that actually a lot of the book now has a bit more hint to it, because when I read The Lost Son, and I read all 389 pages or something of it yesterday, by God, you deliver a hell of a story with a hell of characters. I cannot commend it highly enough. But in the back of my mind was, I mean this in the best way possible, because I think whatever one thinks of him, he's a brilliant storyteller. But Jeffrey Archer's Cain and Abel, that sort of transgenerational sense of the setting up of a dynasty, of how family politics can resonate out through industry, out through the family business endeavors and so on. That makes enormously good sense to me.
And the 40s weren't the only. There were a lot of Italian families who came to the UK. Because they came from villages which were so poor that they just could not eat. So they came as really poor peasants. And there are lots of them, there are a lot of there's Savaronis, and I can't reel them off my head now, but I used to know them. There are a lot of Italian dynasty families who've done really well.
Absolutely, yes. A friend of mine, his father came over and set up his grandfather came over and set up a greengrocers in the borough, which was, here until fairly recently, as you say, a huge part of British society. Can I talk about the dynamics and the trials and tribulations of writing such an in-depth transgenerational trilogy, and how your relationship with the characters that you adore in the beginning, how that changes over time? Do you have to like your characters? Do the people that you set up as a sort of the black sheep and the enemies, do they remain in that way in your head as you're writing, or does your relationship as the author change with the characters as the story progresses?
No, I don't think my relationship with the characters changes. What matters, I think, more than anything else, is that you actually understand why they are like as they are, so that there's always a little bit of sympathy for them. I mean, even the worst of my characters, I hope, are not just cardboard villains. There's a reason that they behave as they do. And you have to put you have to have, I mean, I like to jump from one point of view to the other. I quite like it when I like to get into the head of whatever the character is, who's the main person in that chapter. I don't jump around too much because I think it confuses the reader. But I do try to think what would he say, and actually, I think we all have within us a bit of every character we write about. I mean, I remember when I first wanted to write fiction, I think I'd written a bit of fiction, but I wanted to write screenplays, and I went to a lecture where a guy who was very famous at the time, I forget his name, McGee, I think, and he used to tell people how to write screenplays. And he started his lecture with saying, if you had a happy childhood, you should leave now because you'll never make a good writer. You have to have been really unhappy as a child. And I thought, oh, well, that puts me out. I had a very happy childhood. And I'd written a couple of novels, and so I collared him at lunchtime and said, look, I've written 2 novels and they've sold very well. And I want to write a screenplay now. I don't want to be told that I'll never make a writer at this stage of my career. And he said, well, I can only say one thing to you. He said, either you're in denial, and actually you did have a very unhappy childhood, or he said, you're a terrible writer.
How mean.
So I left his lecture and thought, well.
All right, too. Can you talk us through your childhood? Because I'm intrigued to know where the will to write comes from. Most authors that I speak to, the will to write comes from a fantastic consumption of stories, either through a parent that read them or an inspirational teacher. Your childhood was in South Africa. Was it a bookish childhood? No,
it wasn't really. It was a very outdoorsy childhood. And in fact, for most of my childhood, until I realized that there were more important things around, I was just mad about horses. I wanted to be a riding teacher. And I don't think I'd have been any good at it because I'm not that good a rider. But anyway, I loved horses. And when I was about, I think, 9 or something, I wanted to marry a horse. And I said to my father, I won't marry a horse. I'd read about an English woman who regarded herself as married to her dog. In fact, she had married her dog. She'd gone through some ceremony. And she said she preferred animals to humans. And at the time, I was very cross with my parents, so I agreed with her. And I thought I'd marry a horse. And my father said to me, you do realize that all your children will be centaurs, don't you? And I said, great, wonderful. I thought, well, fantastic. I can fly as well as ride.
Given that we live in a world of unicorns, it's marvelous. Slight edit point here, guys. Prue, can I just point out when you're resting your head on your right hand, that the camera, that's the camera that the audience is seeing, so it obscures your face. Good. Just so that you're aware. Yeah, no, exactly. Bless you. I'm so sorry. Edit out. I assume you didn't marry your horse, but what were the inspirational books that you did read? Were you? I mean, did you?
Well, of course, they're all about horses. I mean, they're all about horses.
I'm guessing Black Beauty.
Black Beauty, cried my eyes out. My Friend Flicker. I can't remember anymore. Mostly about animals. I read all of Paul Gallico because he wrote, Jenny the cat and that one about Dunkirk. What's it called? I can't remember.
Got me now.
It's about a goose or a swan. Anyhow, they all make you cry. And my mother kept saying to me, "Why are you reading these things that make you so sad? Why don't you, read something jollier?" And I said, "No, I just love these weepy, tragic." And so I read all those classics like Ballet Shoes and then when I was very little, of course, I was reading Enid Blyton. And in fact, once when I was about 9, I had been living in England for 3 years with my family because we moved here for 3 years, and then I went back to South Africa. And all my school friends said, "Oh, you've been in England? That's where Enid Blyton is." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Can you get her autograph for us?" And I don't know what made me say it, but I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yes, of course I can." So then, Enid Blyton has a very obvious, very easily forgeable. So I forged lots and lots of Enid Blytons, but I was stupid enough to forge them in our in my maths textbook, which had squares on it. And of course, so I was rumbled in a second. I mean, I dished out all these Enid Blyton signatures. Anyway, that wasn't very good.
Well, interestingly, this has taken a turn that I wasn't expecting. So we've discussed Prue Leith, the novelist, and Prue Leith, the forger, which I never expected to discuss. Now, I can't talk to you without mentioning TV, of course, because you are such a presence. So can we just deeply touch on that? You're used to TV as a medium. Your first TV appearance, if memory serves, was in the 70s with Jack DeManio. Is that right?
No, that was radio. I was on the... the first TV, the first two, that's absolutely correct. I had been on the radio program with him. He did the Today program. And yes. Believe it or not, the Today program used to have a 4-minute slot on Fridays when I told the nation what to cook. And crazy. I mean, you can't imagine the Today program today doing that. Anyway, Jack DeManio used to do it. And then I think he got sacked because he drank a bit. And quite a lot. Tyne Tees decided to do a television program with him. And it was a sort of afternoon show for women, so-called housewives at home. Yes. And so he asked me if I'd come and do the cookery slot on it. So I thought, I can manage that. That can't be that difficult. I mean, he'll talk to me and I'll cook. And so I was prepared to do this. And then a week before we were due to start filming, the production company rang up and said, there's good news and bad news. And I said, what is it? He says, the bad news is that Jack DeManio has left. I did not ask why. And he said, the good news is, would you like the job? Would you like to present it? I didn't say, which I should have said, I have never been on television. I can't present a show. Of course, I said yes and thought, well, I've got a week to learn how to do this. So I went, David Coleman ran at the time a sort of school for television people, which mostly told policemen how to bat back questions and politicians how to avoid them and so on. Yeah. And so I went and I could only afford a morning because it was, I think, even in those days, it was £1,000 a day.
Wow.
And I mean, we're talking about early 70s.
You could buy a house for £3,000.
And anyhow, so I reckoned I could afford £500 on the basis that they were about to pay me quite well. So I had half a day's tuition, and I think all they managed to tell me was that this meant, shut up. This meant there's half a minute left, and this meant go faster. I think that's all I learned. Anyway.
Money well spent, Prue. Money well spent. Can we come to TV to date then? When the call came for Great British Bake Off, was that an easy decision to say yes to?
What do you think, Paul? No, I'd have been yes. No, of course, I had already thought that I would love to. When I heard that Mary Berry was leaving, I thought I'd love to do that job. And then I thought, no, they'll never give it to me because Channel 4 prides itself on being different and cutting edge and shaking things up. They'll want somebody. They won't go for another old lady. They'd had the wonderful Mary Berry, and why try to do the same thing? And so I just dismissed the idea. And then, to my surprise, my agent rang me and said, "What about it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd like my hat in the ring." And so then they asked me if I'd go and meet Paul Hollywood to see how the chemistry was. And of course, I didn't know at the time that they were saying this to many people. They were more than just me in the frame. Mm. And I went to this house in South London, expecting to have a cup of coffee with Paul Hollywood, because I'd never done an audition in my life or anything. So, and then when I arrived, I suddenly realised it was an audition because there was 2 cameramen. And the entire, as far as I could see, the whole hierarchy of Channel 4 and Love Productions, or a lot of men in suits, right. And a makeup lady and a stylist, and it was the works. So I got really nervous, and we had to do. First of all, we had to judge soda bread and then brownies. And when we were doing the soda bread, Paul, who knows more about bread, I must tell you, than anybody in the whole wide world, and is the best baker I've ever clapped eyes on. He's amazing. Anyway, Paul, said what he thought, and of course it was dead spot on and beautifully expressed and absolutely perfect. So I didn't say anything. I just said, yeah, I agree. So when we came off, Paul said, Prue, that won't do. He said, you've got to get in there. He said, you've got to, even if you agree with me, you've got to say the same thing over again so that they can, which I should have known, but I was too stupid or too nervous. So then when we went back for the brownies, I got stuck in better. And then they asked me to come for another audition in Paul's house to do what they call the technical, which is the one that, they have a perfect model of it, and Paul and I discuss it. And so I thought, by now my blood is up. I really want the job. At the beginning I'd be very casual. I'll never get it, and they won't ask me anyway, and I don't need it, and I'm too busy. But by then, having gone through all that, I wanted this job. So I said to my husband, I know what I'm going to do, because they asked me what I thought the technical should be for this final thing. And so I said, a Gugelhof, which is an Austrian fruited, yeasted sort of bread stroke cake. And it's delicious. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll make the perfect one that we'll show. So I made a Gugelhof. And I got a recipe off YouTube by a very famous Austrian chef, which I thought would be better than mine. I've got a very good, Gugelhof recipe. But I made his one, and it had so much fruit in it that when I turned it out, it just fell apart. I mean, it was delicious. It was delicious, but it was in pieces. So then I made another one, and this time I followed the recipe in our book. And I was rather proud of it. It looked wonderful, smelled wonderful, brown, golden. And it comes out of one of those fluted tins.
Yes.
So it just looks very dramatic. And so I called my husband in to have a look at it. And he walked right round it, and he just said, Paul Hollywood, it'll never get past Paul Hollywood. And I said, why? And he said, look, and it had stuck, the sugar had stuck to one of those little ridges on the tin, and there was a little bit of burnt edge. And so I thought, perhaps it would. So I thought, if it's not perfect, I better not take it. So I never told them, and I never took it. And the home economist had made a perfectly good Gugelhof anyway.
So Paul never got to judge your Gugelhof. What a terrible shame. You've been in the public eye for so long, Prue, not least with restaurants, with your schools, with all the work you do behind the scenes for underprivileged people, teaching people how to be chefs, teaching people how to be cooks. This this newfound fame, if I can put it that way. Are you comfortable with that? Do you like that? Do you get stopped in the supermarkets on the high street?
Paul, I absolutely adore it. I mean, I've always been a tremendous show-off and a fantastic egotist. I just love the attention. I like it when people stop me in the street and in the supermarket. I mean, I would hate to have the level of fame that made your life impossible. If you were Madonna or Angelina Jolie or something, you wouldn't be able to go out without a sort of entourage of people to keep other people away, and that would be horrible. But I have just the right level, that enough to make me feel good. It sort of lifts my, somebody. And most people say nice things very occasionally, especially when I was on Great British Menu. Foodie type people would come up and say, I don't agree with what you thought of so and so, But one woman, I'll never forget her, and it just shows the power of television. She said, that lemon pudding, why didn't you, that guy should have won. And I said, why? And so she said, the lemon pudding was absolutely perfect. And I said, it looked perfect, and yes, it was very good, but you didn't taste it. I did taste it. She said, but it was delicious.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it was delicious. She said it was delicious. she knew it was delicious and she hadn't tasted it. It's fascinating.
Now that's the
So
commitment.
you get, something like that.
That's
and
extraordinary.
I tell you, when it becomes sometimes a little bit of a problem is when we were filming Bake Off earlier, if we all stayed in a hotel, and sometimes there'd be a wedding in the hotel, and so all the wedding guests would be a bit drunk. I mean, most people, when they're sober, are absolutely really respectful. I mean, they wouldn't come barging into if 4 of us are having dinner. But if you're drunk enough and your friends egg you on, go on, you ask them, you suddenly get a mob of wedding guests and the bridegroom. Can we have a photograph with the family? And when I'm sure when they look at the photographs, they think, well, what on earth did we invite that? That sort of thing is a bit maddening, but you can't say no.
Exactly, and nor should you.
You can't say go away.
Nor should you. That's the price. That's the price of fame.
Exactly.
Can I think of you from henceforth as the Angelina Jolie of British baking? Or
No,
would you rather Madonna? The Madonna of British,
I don't want to be
cuisine.
I really, truly do not want to be that famous. I think that's too much price to pay.
I think, yes, it has its own costs. As I mentioned in the introduction, Prue, you had taken quite a long break from writing cookery books. You launched one a couple of years ago, which was the first one for 25 years. You have another one out, which I think is called The Vegetarian Cookbook.
A Vegetarian Kitchen.
I beg your pardon, The Vegetarian Kitchen. What did you set out to do with this, and why is vegetarian cooking now of interest to you? Or has it always been?
Well, I've always loved vegetarian food. And in fact, when I had my restaurant, I think one of the reasons we had a Michelin star was that we always had a vegetarian menu running alongside the other one. And in fact, one year we won Vegetarian Restaurant of the Year or something. And I was absolutely horrified because I thought, oh my God, all my customers who come to us for a good veal chop or something won't come anymore because I think we're only a vegetarian restaurant. But I became interested in vegetarian food when my sister-in-law, who's vegetarian, said to me at my restaurant that I said, why do you always eat the same thing? And and why do you always ask the waiter what the vegetarian option is? And she said, well, I don't like reading. And I said that, the menu is full of vegetarian things. And she said, yes, but they're on the same menu as the suckling pig and the veal kidneys. I don't want to go through that. I'd rather just ask the waiter. And that made me think about it. And so we started to do a separate vegetarian menu. So I have always been interested in it. And I've always eaten, and I've been eating more and more veg because the more conscious I've become of how badly treated the animals are before they get to our table, mostly. So I only eat, and I can afford to do this. So I don't want to sound particularly virtuous about it, but because I can afford to, we never eat anything except grass-fed beef and organic chickens and so on and so on. So sustainable fish and so forth. And I don't think I could give up all of that. I probably could. I mean, John and I had 3 weeks in India recently, and we had an entirely vegetarian diet. And we were South India; they're pretty well vegetarian, and the vegetarian food was so varied and so delicious that the trouble with vegetarian food for most people is that you have to. It's not like just slamming something in the oven or under the grill and then, having a salad with it. You have to make a little effort with the veg. If it's not to be a bit boring, except now when everything is so, I've just got yesterday we got some spuds out of the garden and the first marsh to peas. And I mean, then you just want to eat them by themselves because they're so fresh and so good.
Here's the additional benefit. I was talking to Jonathan Porritt for the Lockdown LitFest some weeks ago. I was saying if there's one thing that you could tell that people can change that will make a difference to global warming, to how we're treating the planet. And he said, to be perfectly honest, it's really simple. Eat less red meat. The damage that the production of red meat is causing the planet is far away. It far exceeds the damage caused by taking an air flight or whatever.
And do you know what? He's so right. And the interesting thing is, I've been banging on for years that schools ought to have far more vegetarian food.
Yeah.
But I've never been bold enough to say they should go vegetarian. But there are 2 schools I know of, and there are probably more, who have made their entire one is entirely vegetarian. It's a school in Oxford, and it's a state school. It's a secondary school. Everybody was easy with primary children, or it's easy in the public sector, because in the independent sector, because they have more money. But these are state schools, and there's one in Sheffield which has 1 day of fish, which is on Friday, because fish is very good for the brain and it's an extremely healthy way of getting protein into children. But the rest of the meals are all vegetarian. And I went to that school to eat lunch, and they had the most wonderful buffet, but everything on it. There wasn't very much choice, but there was vegetables and salad, and there was a curry that day. And they had tacos that you could fill with any of the various salady things and hummus and so on. And the children absolutely loved it. And these are 12-year-old boys, which is exactly the audience we think.
They can also be sensible about what they eat, as it turns out. You've won a lot of awards. You get recognized in the street. You put the work in. What does it mean to you? What does that, being able to introduce you as Prue Leith CBE, does this mean something to you? Is there a pride in what you've achieved?
Yeah, there is. Sometimes I'm a bit, if I read some sort of biography like you might write before a LitFest, I think, gosh, did I really do all that? And then I remember that I have lived for a very long time, Paul. I've had time to do all these things. And of course, it all comes from curiosity, that I'm one of those bossy sort of women who can't, if I see something wrong, I always want to fix it.
Yes.
And when my children were little and we would be walking along the street, if I saw a plastic bag blowing in the breeze, Daniel, my son, would sort of stiffen, and I'd be holding his hand, and he'd say, "Mum, please, don't, Mum, don't," because he'd know that I would go and pick it up, and that would embarrass him. I'm interfering, and I've interfered a lot in school food and education generally. And so I have done a whole lot of different things, but mainly just because I'm interested and because I've got energy and health and,
Prue, you say about meddling, there's one last thing I'd like people to know about, because I don't think you've really received the credit for it. And the fact that I know that you did it, as a lot of people did, makes me, 1, proud to know you, and 2, rather proud of what you did. Can you talk us through, please, the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square and your role in it?
Well, one day, about 15 years ago or something, I was in a taxi going around Trafalgar Square. And in those days, you could go around Trafalgar Square in a taxi. And I looked at this huge plinth, which is sort of, I think it's 19 feet long and 9 feet wide or something. It is huge.
In the northwest corner, yeah.
And in the northwest corner, just outside the National Gallery. And I looked up at this thing, and it was full of pigeon poo. And, the efforts that the council had made to stop the pigeons landing on it, which is horrible little spikes covered in feathers and things. And I just thought, why didn't they put back whatever the sculpture was that used to be there? So I pulled out a pad and I drafted a letter to the Evening Standard, which said, exactly that. Disgraceful. I've lived in London for 20 years and this has been this empty plinth all the time. Anyway, there was a huge reaction from people. They published the letter, and lots of people wrote in and said, "Silly woman, doesn't she realize that sculpture, that plinth has always been empty? It was originally designed for William IV. He was so unpopular that when he died, nobody would put it up. And since then, nobody has been able to agree what should go on it. There's been often, many people have made attempts. Well, of course, this is like a red rag to the bull to me. If somebody says this can't be done, I want to say what to do. So I was just about to become chairman of the Royal Society of Arts, the RSA. And so I thought, if I'm chairman, this will be a really good project because I'll push it and the council will have to listen. I'm the chairman. And actually, they were all sweet. The council were totally on board. And so we decided that we would make it an RSA project rather than a Prue project. And we got a committee together and we talked about it. And at first we asked the public what they wanted. We had a ridiculous number of suggestions, but they were just, some of them were ridiculous, like, Rupert Bear or, I don't know, all sorts of things. But anyway, Mrs. Thatcher on a tank, because there's that iconic picture of her on a tank. A lot of people wanted that. But I couldn't get anybody to agree on anything because somebody's hero is always somebody else's villain. And that's such an iconic place, Trafalgar Square, that nobody would agree. And we had to, so finally, one of my committee, a brilliant guy called James Lingwood, who runs an organization called Art Angel, he said, let's go for contemporary sculpture and temporary contemporary sculpture. If we use it as an exhibition space, nobody will object because as soon as if they know it's going to come down in 9 months or a year, then what's the point of protesting about it? Because by the time you've been through all the committees, it'll be done anyway. So that was the defining thing, and that was after about 18 months of struggle. It still took us 5 years in all to get all the right permissions. We had to take that idea to I think 13 different committees. There was the Georgian Society, the Victorian Society, the Fine Arts Commission, the this, that, and the next thing. And it was a huge struggle. And my worst enemy in that thing was Norman St. John Stevens. Do you remember Norman St. John Stevens?
Yeah, indeed I do.
And he was chairman of the Royal Fine Art Commission. Right. And he was just implacably opposed. And he'd used every honest and dishonest method he could to prevent us getting permission. But we beat him in the end.
Prevailed.
And it's been a huge success. And one of the loveliest things, I mean, it is the thing that if you ask me what are you most proud of, I would say that because, first of all, with any luck, it'll go on for a long time, if not forever. The public love it. And it keeps people interested in art because, even if they hate it, it changes all the time. There's something dead about statues just being there forever because nobody notices them except people who want to pull them down, because otherwise you just drive past them if they're there too long. So I'm for changing statues, but for different reasons. I think from an art point of view, you need to look at things. It's like moving your pictures around. It's a good idea because you look at them. Otherwise, you don't even remember where they are. Do
you want to discuss your view on the contemporary political outlook on statuary up and down the nation?
Well, I think that's really what I feel, that I'm all for people. These statues belong to the present generation. Yes. So if the present generation wants to get rid of them, even if they were great Victorians, and the Victorians, even if they were paid for by the public because they wanted to commemorate some great Victorian, if the present generation of that town doesn't want them, they should go. But it should go with due process. I'm afraid I'm boringly in favour of due process. Yep. I don't think you can just have a small minority of people pulling things down when the majority might want it to stay there.
The Romans were quite happy.
And I think what I really... Sorry, can I just say one thing I love about the Churchill debate? Is one of the lovely things about Churchill, and I would hate to see Churchill go, because he's there for a very good reason, and without him we probably wouldn't have won the war. But he had a lot of bad things. He did a lot of bad things in his life, and we should know about those things as well. But what is so interesting is he shares that Parliament Square with all sorts of people that he would not have approved of, like Gandhi. Mandy, like Pankhurst, the suffragettes. You know, I like the thought that he is living with his enemies, yes, exactly. And they're there for different reasons.
Nice argument. Lest we forget, of course, the Romans were very keen to pull down their own statues and turn them into coinage. It's not the first time it's happened. Not the first time it's happened. Prue, as we've said, the final part of well, is it the final part? That's my question, really. The third part of this this chronicle is The Lost Son. From what you say, this may be the last, that it's actually going to be a trilogy, or have you left the door open for more fiction writing from the pen of Prue Leith in years to come?
No, I think I will probably write. I'm thinking of writing short stories. I think, you know what, at my advanced age, I could not take on another trilogy because I couldn't guarantee to finish it. So, but I think I don't know whether it's, well, partly because I don't have absolutely any more burning desire, which might mean that I shouldn't write anything. But I do like writing. I like journalism. I like writing short pieces. And I've written a couple of short stories, and I think I might continue with that.
Look forward to
well, I write a novel. I have got a half-written novel, which I abandoned because I slightly fell out with a publisher who kept wanting to tell me what was politically correct. And, you know, it's quite difficult for writers at the moment. There's such a lot of things you can't say, and your characters are not allowed to say, which is ridiculous. This is fiction. If they, you know, if I want to write about some prejudiced white middle-class male who is a racist, and he's a fictional character, I should be allowed to do that. But some publishers, not mine, I have a haste to say.
Not Quercus, no.
No, not Quercus.
How woke are you?
Wait a minute. But I stopped. But I might go back and do that, and maybe take it to Quercus.
Okay. We have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Prue, can I just say it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being so generous with your answers. I wish audiences could see what I see in another screen, which is your beautiful, beautiful kitchen. May I ask a question of you? Would it be possible for us to have a photograph of your kitchen to put up for social media?
Yeah, of course.
I'd love people to see that where I've been talking to you with the wine and the curly and the curly lampstands and so on. It's the most beautiful kitchen in the world. We'll put it up on social media. Grâce à Prue Leith. Prue Leith, thank you so much for coming to join us at the Lockdown LitFest. Ladies and gentlemen, Prue Leith, CBE, giving chapter and verse on everything from statuary to cookbooks to vegetarianism to chronicles. Her latest fiction work is entitled The Lost Son. It is part of the gripping family drama. And as the publisher says, perfect for fans of Penny Vincenzi, Barbara Taylor Bradford. I think fans of Penny Vincenzi and Barbara Taylor Bradford would do themselves a very good service by reading Prue Leith, and also fans of Jeffrey Archer. Prue's latest cookbook is entitled The Vegetarian Kitchen, also published by Quercus. Prue?
No, it's published by Macmillan.
Also published by Macmillan. So The Lost Son, published by Quercus, The Vegetarian Kitchen, published by Macmillan. As ever, ladies and gentlemen, we do this for you, and we do it. We're driven only and fueled only by talent and time, or so we like to think. If you'd like to make a contribution to us, we have a Be a Patron page. If you could afford £5 for a ticket price or something like that, we know you're watching from your sofas. We're stopping you having to go out into the rain, and you can keep social distancing, but we're running on fresh air. If you'd like to help us, we'd be delighted to have your help. By goodness, we need it. Prue, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Keep well, keep safe, look after yourselves. Cheerio.